My name is Heather Feather. I am the owner of Rare Bird Medicine, and today's topic is the laws of truth. I will get into my credentials to discuss this topic in a moment, but I first want to lay down a foundation for what we're going to discuss. So I want to discuss two different archetypes of truth. The first archetype is called universal truth. It's also been referred to as absolute truth or the truth. An example of a universal truth or an absolute truth or the truth is love is. Love is an absolute truth. It's always true. Irrespective of somebody being psychopathic or sociopathic or having had a brain injury where they are, or whatever, they're narcissistic, they lack empathy, irrespective of different matrices of being that are available at Earth School, it does not detract from the fact that love is. Love still exists, irrespective of these different matrices of being that are available at Earth School. The other type of truth that I want to discuss is what's called individual truth. Individual truth is the truth that you hold to be true. Now, individual truth, in my experience, is often false. It's not actually aligned with the truth. You believe it to be true. It is the foundation under which you stand upon, but not necessarily connected to the truth. Could be. And not necessarily connected to an absolute truth. An example of individual truth is when you start describing love. So an absolute or universal truth is to say love is. But once you put descriptors on it, and you say love is patient, love is calm, love is kind. Well, is love only those things? No, love is a lot of things. It has a lot of different expressions. We have had poets since the beginning of time, like Rumi, that, have worked to express what is this thing called love, and songs about it and so much information about it. And so once we start kind of putting it in the box of our individual truth, of our understanding of it, we start losing sight of the absolute truth. Because the reality is, it's here, it exists. It's been existing. And once we get into the descriptors of it, to me, love is a verb. It's an action. It is an active expression. It is a feeling, which feelings are an active dynamic principle within the self as well. But I don't think it's solely that. Because I think love is multidimensional, multifaceted, and I think it is, from my philosophy, from my individual truth, I think it is the foundation back of everything. I think everything else is false evidence appearing real, or the stories that we tell in a realm in which we're experiencing the contrast of duality. Now, who do I think I am? Who do I think I am talking to you about truth? Well, let's talk for a minute about who I am. I have spent 2,000 lifetimes in a soul collective. Soul collective is a group of individuals that you incarn with again and again and again. If you hold the philosophy of reincarnation, if you follow concepts like Akashic Records readings and the information that can be perceived from them, because I've had several of them. And in my Dharma profile, a Dharma profile represents a person's teaching, offering, what they naturally give to humanity. In my Dharma profile, it said I've had a soul collective that is focused on the topic of truth, specifically universal and individual truth and love. So that's why I just said all that. And I've spent 2,000 lifetimes focused in that collective archetype to hone in on the Dharma that I created. The Dharma that I created is multidimensional quantum connection to justice, truth, love, and the pursuit of divine awareness. Even the shaman I primarily trained with always calls me Quantum Woman. I love the quantum field, so I see why it was included in my Dharma. But I spent 2,000 lifetimes creating that Dharma, and in this lifetime, I mastered it. And in the mastery of it, I am complete with that soul collective. I will no longer be working with that soul collective. I'm moving into a new soul collective, and I'm moving into a new Dharma. And my new Dharma is going to be illumination. And my new duty is to bring the light of love, the light of awareness, to those false evidence appearing real or shadowy corners where mind can go in a dualistic, contrast-oriented realm when we forget the self, forget absolute truths. The challenge with individual truth is that it often does forget the universal or absolute truth, right? So we can say, in your individual truth, you can say love is tough love. That was a big thing when I was a kid. Tough love. I was like, that sounds oxymoronic. It doesn't make any sense to me. Sounds like a bully trying to pretend like they're part of the love team, So you can say love is tough. And that doesn't necessarily connect to the universal truth of love is. Because love isn't just tough. Love can be tough. It can be difficult. I've had a lot of love to give in this life, and it hasn't always been well received. And that can be painful, and so love can be painful, but love isn't only ever painful, right? So sometimes when we hold our individual truths, or when we're walking in an individual truth, we are absolutely forgetting that an absolute truth walks alongside it, which the absolute truth, if we were to but remember it, would say, love may be painful to me right now. However, because love is, and love is multifaceted and multidimensional, this pendulum will swing and I'll experience it in a different way soon, right? And so we could soften into not being in so much pain around the topic of love if we remembered love is, it's an absolute truth. I'm always going to cycle back into many variations of expression of what that means. And even though this moment, an hour may be difficult, an easier hour is going to arrive. I have been a romantic my entire life. I have wanted to be with a beloved my entire life. And I thought it was an absolute truth that I will be with a beloved. And I finally actually come to a space at 49 where all of a sudden I am finally, and I don't know how it's happening with the way my brain is wired, but I am surrendering the idea of relationship altogether. That actually, my life is great, and I'm losing that attachment to that piece. And so I used to think that my life would not be worth living if I did not get to that place where I was able to one day, just before I die, meet the beloved. And my life is very worth living to me today. I have this magical, mystical school to create, right? So the reason I want to flush up the concepts of individual truth is that I find many two-leggeds, as they touch their individual truths, as I said, they often can dissociate actually from truth altogether. So I'll give you a quick example. I've had actual people tell me in my ear that gender is a binary. So I've heard that. Oh, I was on the phone. Gender is a binary. Oh, that's a really interesting false idea that you hold to be true. And so I'm sorry, can you say that again? Gender is a binary. Okay. Do you believe that to be true? Yes. And so for that individual, that was their truth. Likely it was their truth because they haven't had a lot of exposure to other variations of expression of gender. So I'm not going to demand that that person be more evolved in their understanding right now, which is dictator-like and unevolved. I'm not going to demand that they get to a place of understanding that I hold, because the role of me is taken. It's not your job to be me. What I want to do is understand that's interesting. So my next question is, have you ever heard of an intersex being? Have you ever heard of that? No. Oh, okay. Have you ever heard of the term hermaphrodite? Oh yeah, I've heard of hermaphrodites. Okay, well that's the term we used to use. We don't use that term anymore. The term now is intersexed, and we have always had intersexed beings. So I'm just starting the conversation with you right now on the topic of gender based on your individual truth that it's a binary, and automatically we've recognized that you are not identified with the truth in your individual truth, because the fact is we've always had male, female, and intersex beings. Now, there's a lot further I could go in that conversation. If you were to honor Native traditions and Native teachings, there are many, and I do, deeply. I always am trying to not only respect them, but learn them and follow them. I find them to be keepers of great wisdom. And if you follow Native tradition, there's something called a two-spirit, where you can be born. I was born female genitalia, female body, and you can literally hold equal amounts, masculine and feminine principle, and express both in the life. You may identify as both. You may wear garments identifying as both. Your tone, cadence, presentation may change into one or the other, and you might have quite fluid movements in your expression between the concept of male and female. And that two-spirit is typically considered a very honored person in the Native tribe. So if we're really looking at spectrums of expression of the concept called gender, there's a fourth gender called two-spirit. It's not intersex. It's not being born with both genitalias to some degree. Or, you might have part male, part female in some way in an intersex body. However, in this regard, you would have two-spirit. And so it's interesting because people want to get really on their high horse. And it's like, as we watch this conversation around trans people and bathrooms, it's like, how do you think intersex people have felt? How do you think two-spirit people have felt? There are genders that have been present all along. And what you're saying is, I don't really care that you're born intersex. Most of the people I know are male or female. You need to pick one and go into that bathroom. And it's like, okay, oppressive dictator, duly noted. Now, I'm not here to change the mind of an oppressive dictator mind. You know why? Because we have free will, and there's 8.2 billion people. And if spirit allows free will, who am I to try to grab it from you? I don't find it very liberal to be a dictator and demand to others that they be evolved now. Be evolved now, go. I understand the desire for it. I understand the interest in it. And I find it oppressive and lacking the capacity to truly give a person peace. Because if you are waiting for everyone to get as evolved as you might have a long, miserable lifetime, because it's probably not going to happen in your lifetime. As a matter of fact, since the dawn of time, since the beginning of time to this very day, where we now have 8.2 billion people in the population, we have always had diversity of philosophy in the two-leggeds. We have never had alignment and agreement. We've never had all liberal or all conservative. So I find it a bit of a fool's errand to expect people to get where you are. What I want to do with two-leggeds is be able to be in conversation and to be in dialogue. I don't want to go, you think it's a binary? Never talk to me, lose my number. I want to go, that's interesting. Are you familiar with this third one that's been around since forever? Have you ever heard of that? Let's talk about that for a second, because it sounds to me like the individual truth that you hold to be true is disconnected from the truth, and maybe don't value the truth. You can be a serial killer, cannibal, rapist, as I often say. You can be anything you want in a free will zone. You do not have to be a good person if we want to judge things as good and bad, which is a judgment. So that's Heather's talking about hot topics. Cool. Here's another one. The topic of feminism. Throughout my life, I will be 50 this year. In the nearly 5 decades I've been alive, I have almost consistently and quite often heard conversations around the topic of feminism, and the only thing being discussed is women. Now, I don't know if this is because feminism has the word femme in it, but feminism has to do with equality of the sexes. So if you hold an individual truth that feminism is important to you, and you are not talking about the rights of intersex people, trans people, two-spirited people, you're not talking about the rights of our men, you're not talking about the rights of our women in equal measure, I would venture to guess there is a dissociation for you between the topic of feminism that you hold as an important individual truth and the truth around the topic of feminism. And that's because just because it has femme does not mean women or vagina. Feminism is foundationally, and our dictionaries are changing, unfortunately, over time. Foundationally, when this term was created, it had to do with a certain layer of equality between the sexes. So if we're going to talk about the equality between the sexes, the first thing I ever did when I got to Earth School was cry. Most beings, when they come out of a stomach or vagina, they cry. And most of our men, especially here in the West, we treat as if they are weak or, stupid, or it's not allowed, or, we tell them, don't be such a vagina. You use the P word usually there, if they cry. And we invalidate their right to grieve, their right to be in emotional pain over their relationships. And to me, that is a far more humanitarian crime than not getting paid enough. I can't tell you how many feminist conversations I've listened to that are solely about women and often about women's pay. Is that part of the feminist topic of conversation? Sure, absolutely. Yeah, let's consider this Me Too piece. Let's consider this payment piece. But jobs were made by mankind, not by spirit. We don't come in with money in our hand. You know what I mean? So we would need to address how we treat men regarding children as well, for example. There are a lot of concepts where men do not have equal rights, even though we are acting like they destroy the patriarchy, screw men. Kind of the energy of the modern age. And it's like, I have never seen a woman go up to a child in a park and be shunned away. I've seen it happen to men, and I've had men talk to me about it. Men that love children, men that are honorable, men that have integrity, men that want to help children and want to say loving things to them about them loving themselves, and they've been shooed away as some type of creep because that's how we often treat our men. Where is the feminist movement addressing this piece of how we honor men in their relationship to children and how precious and valuable it can be? I've known many men that serve children well. So the question I'm asking you today is that if you hold individual truth, are you certain that your individual truths are connected to truth? One way you can do it is look it up. If you're not sure, if you go, gender is a binary, you can look up, is gender a binary? What other concepts are you? I'm pretty sure today AI will give you lots of information about how it's not a binary and never has been. If you want to truly know the truth, if you want to know the laws of the truth, if you want to value the truth, the most important thing you can do is question that which you hold to be your individual truth. You can always subscribe to Rare Bird Medicine on YouTube, like and comment there. I always love your thoughts. Amun.